Hi everyone! We are live from the first Women in Machine Learning Symposium. My name is Joana Carrasqueira and I'm a Developer Relations Lead for the TensorFlow community at Google, and I'll be a host for today's event. Thank you all for joining us at this very exciting and unique event. We have a very diverse lineup of speakers from all backgrounds with riveting stories and experiences to share for today's event. It is our pleasure to welcome machine learning developers, product managers, engineers, entrepreneurs, influencers, and researchers pushing the boundaries of what we can do with machine learning. All journeys are different, and I believe that we have so much to learn from each other, and that's exactly why we created this event. At Google, we believe that diversity is core to innovation, and we know there's work to be done in improving representation to achieve equity in machine learning communities. As one of our speakers put it, to help us build more innovative and better ML products, it is important that our machine intelligence we create represents human diversity. Thank you, Margaret Reed, for the wise words, and I look forward to hearing from you and from all of our speakers today. We've crafted an amazing event experience to allow and empower you to ask questions in a safe space. Please take this opportunity to ask questions, network with each other, connect with our Google recruiters at the networking event, and most importantly, have fun. I would like to thank the team bringing you this event experience and all of our speakers for being here today, for showing up for the community and empowering the next generation of women leaders in machine learning. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our first keynote speaker, and it is my honor to welcome to this event Janine Banks, Google's Vice President of Core Third-Party Developer Products. Thank you so much, Janine. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Joanna. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us at our first ever Women in Machine Learning Symposium. I'm Vice President of Google's core third-party developer products, and it's my job to make sure that we're creating the tools and services that you need to be successful. Before coming to Google, I've worked with some amazing product engineering and data science teams at companies like Amazon, GE, and IBM. I've had lots of fun designing and building critical cloud infrastructure for data management, commerce, and compute. But it was my time at GE in the healthcare division when I first realized the impact that ML can have in all of our daily lives. I'm going to get into that and why diversity is so important when building and deploying ML models. But first, I want to take a step back and share a bit about my story. I remember being a kid growing up in Brooklyn, New York, a place sometimes referred to as a concrete jungle. I got exposed to PCs and news about the future of technology through my dad's subscription to Byte magazine. Some of you may have heard of it. He used to keep old copies laying around, so it gave me something to do when I was bored. Little did I know that the world was living in would go from being a concrete jungle to a silicon alley, which helped lead to my love for science and mathematics at an early age. Well, years later, I was offered an internship at BNL, the Brookhaven National Laboratory in New York, which is part of a program to encourage youth who live in Long Island, New York, to pursue careers in STEM. Originally, my internship assignment was to lay cables for a new communication network at BNL. But on my first day, I got lost on the way back to the job site, and I found myself in the data center. That's where I first learned to code. My story underscores how increased access to resources leads to an increase in opportunities for underrepresented people. Over the past few decades, there has been strong spurts of industry support for STEM. Investments by nonprofit organizations, private companies, the public sector, all open up the opportunity for people from different backgrounds and places to enter these fields. There have been moments in time with increased awareness and interest in bringing more people into tech and providing more equitable journeys. But these industry efforts really need to be more intentional and consistent. In 2018, Wired magazine worked with Montreal startup Element AI to estimate the diversity of leading machine learning researchers and found that only 12% were women. That's quite shocking, especially when you consider that over 50% of the population in the United States is women. There needs to be a steady stream of resources and capital. AI and ML are helping people solve real problems today. That is why representation is so important, ensuring we are addressing issues, the correct issues in the right way. Because ML products that are used by everybody need to be created by teams with representation, and improving accessibility is fundamental to achieve equity. Now, jumping back to my time at GE, I had the opportunity to work with amazing engineers, nurses, scientists, product managers, and designers building ML-powered decision support systems. MRI and CT scans generate massive amounts of data. It takes really powerful computation on huge data sets to spot tumors in thick breasts or lesions in brain tissue. ML is making that so much easier and helping clinicians produce better quality and efficient diagnoses. At Google, we saw areas where we needed to make substantial strides in product inclusion. For example, Google's Image Equity Initiative is a cross-product mission from our teams to make more equitable camera and image tools for people of color. Last year, we introduced low light mode for Google Meet on mobile using AI to automatically adjust your video, making you more visible if you're in a dark environment. Having too much light behind you, such as a window on a sunny day, can also be challenging for many cameras. Google Meet on the web now automatically detects when a user appears underexposed and enhances the brightness to improve their visibility. And there's just so much more to do. With more diverse teams working on ML, we can mitigate a lot of these issues before they go into production. With that in mind, our Kaggle team piloted a grant program this year to support the career advancement and inclusion of historically underrepresented data scientists who are Black, Indigenous, or people of color. This 3-month program supported 49 participants through mentorship, education, and community resources, producing work to grow their data science portfolio. We look forward to growing this program in years to come. And now I want to take a moment to also look at the tools and resources we have in the responsible AI and AI fairness space. We created a responsible AI toolkit at Google to help you integrate these practices into your ML workflow. I want to take a minute to talk through some of these tools. Understanding your data is a critical step in building a model, and it's critical and central to identifying potential sources of bias. Know Your Data is a web-based tool that helps you understand rich data sets, such as images and text, and seamlessly explore them to spot potential biases or imbalances as part of your workflow. Another great tool is fairness indicators, which generate metrics for transparency reporting. So that helps you make better decisions about how to deploy models responsibly. This tool is part of the TensorFlow model analysis. Those are just a few of our product offerings. Please visit the Responsible AI Toolkit to learn more about them. The tools that I talked about are easy ways to start implementing responsible AI practices and mitigate biases in your ML solutions. When we build teams that are truly representative of the world and the users of our products, it leads to fairness in the ML models that power the world. Thank you all for tuning in. We have a great lineup of content. And with that, I want to welcome Amanda to talk about the open source ML communities.
everyone. I'm Amanda Kasseri, a researcher and engineer on Google's Open Source Programs Office team. It's a pleasure to be with you today to briefly talk about the very large body of work that is cultivating more diversity in open source ecosystems. At Google, we strongly believe that open source is for everyone. We actively work to identify and remove barriers to open source community participation and contribution. We've invested for decades to grow the open source community and expand access to as many people as possible. And as hard as we work, we know these efforts do not reach everyone. We know that we have gaps in our understanding, in our ability to reach people, and in the limitations of our own constraints. So as we try, learn, and grow, how do we know we are reaching as many people as possible? And how do we know who is being left behind? This is where we have to do the complex, nuanced work of understanding people, how they identify, and what makes them feel connected. We know that we will never achieve a balanced representative ecosystem without considering human connection. If our goals focus solely on single factor surface level diversity statistics, we will fail to capture the many intersectional identities and the barriers they continue to face, which keeps them from finding a place in open source that feels like belonging. And so, to know where we are and how we can do better, we have to measure our efforts and the impacts that they make. Diversity must be pursued with intentionality, and so must measuring it. We can learn from the work of organizational scientists such as Professor Quinetta Roberson, which focuses any measurement of diversity, equity, inclusion on an organization's how and why. The why for Google is clear. We want everyone to have access to open source communities and the ecosystems they create. The how we measure is much more challenging. Our current picture of open source has many known gaps. Researchers and analysts continue to over-index measuring participation in and representation of open source communities based on changes to code in repositories. Not only does this actively exclude all other work that exists outside of a pull request, it also incorrectly assumes repository metadata as a source of truth and historical record. We also see non-representative surveys, usually conducted by technology platforms, continue to be quoted as a baseline census for who is present, interested in, and working in open source. Continuing to use this kind of information, especially from spaces known to be exclusionary to the very people we want to include, does not send a message which allows others to see mirrors of themselves or windows into open source. The good news is that we have so many people like you who continually believe that inclusive spaces are worthy of our time, attention, investment, and energy. And while cultivating diversity in open source ecosystems is a very large body of work, we have some good starting points. Feminist geographer Joni Seeger once said that what gets counted counts. So to do better in measuring open source ecosystems, we have to ask what we are counting and for whom. What is the criteria we are using to define a contribution to an open source project? In machine learning and AI, how are we evaluating and tracking the work that is dataset curation, maintenance, and documentation as essential to advancing technology? How do we value and invest in and give credit for design work in open source? Whose skill sets are represented when we measure open source, and whose are left out? Much of my current work in Google's Open Source Programs Office is centered on data feminist principle number 7, make labor visible. And while I know from experience that not every space or community in open source is free of barriers or toxicity, I also know that we can never grow more diverse, equitable, and inclusive communities until every person feels like their work is important, valued, visible, and essential to the long-term sustainability of open source. And so here is the part where I get to ask you for help. First, I would like to encourage you to find your open. Open source software is absolutely essential in our modern technology world. However, there are many other opens which are part of the ecosystem. Open data makes it possible for us to see, understand, and critically evaluate applied research and the assumptions it makes about our world. Open standards make the creation of technology available to everyone, rather than relegating it behind expensive proprietary standards. Open governance ensures many seats at the table, deciding on the path forward that impacts a global industry. And there's more. Open models decrease the obfuscation outcomes obtainable only from high computational resources. Open science lowers the barriers to scientific understanding and exponentially increases communication in crisis situations. Open communities create spaces for people to find themselves, one another, and a place to explore their future. And I know there is endless need, and there's only one of each of you. So I want to emphasize that your time and skills are valuable and deserve to be spent in a community who values you and lifts you up. So when you find that place, I would encourage you to bring others along with you so we can do better together. Thank you. I'll be taking some questions now from the Q&A. So if there's anything you would like me to have a go at, please go ahead and submit them, and I'll start going with ones that are already submitted. So first off, how can students get involved in open source software? My first suggestion for getting people involved in open source software, if you're a student, is the Google Summer of Code. It's a program that's been running for, I think, 25 years now. I might be off on that, but it's been running for a long time. And 2021 is our just wrapped up. There's going to be some really wonderful new features coming to the program next year. So I highly encourage everybody to get involved with that or check it out, either as a student or as a mentor. There's a lot of wonderful projects that work on that. The second question is, do I have any ideas on how to quantify and measure open source software contributions? I always have a hard time justifying and pitching resources for open source software work. I'm so glad that somebody asked this question. I have many thoughts on this. A lot of the work that's done, as I talked about previously, in open source software contributions typically get measured by platforms or repositories live online. And this isn't because there's not ways to measure or quantify other kinds of contributions. It's just been the way that's been most publicly visible for a long time. It's also the way that maybe researchers do when they're trying to collect information at scale to answer a scientific question, but doesn't answer all of the other kinds of work. So I like to encourage people to go back to kind of that, again, that why and that how. So why are you doing this work and what kind of impact is that having? So if you can start to tie things back into a mission, into a reason, if you can talk about the work that you are doing because of the why that you're doing it, then you can start to understand, here's what I'm doing, here's why I'm doing it, and then start to see if I want to put something that would be like a little observer on that. What is it something I could do that would be able to give me some indication that I'm doing a good job? So I'd actually recommend for that framework breakdown, Julia Ferrioli and I gave a talk earlier in the year at FOSS Backstage. It's called Preventing Random Acts of Metrics in Open Source Ecosystems. And it's a basic framework for developing metrics that are useful for open source. So I'd like to refer people to that in case that you are interested in learning more about that. Let's see. Next question. I see somebody asked, I want to be a machine learning developer. How do I start? This is a great question because machine learning developer can be the same role that does a lot of different jobs. The way that I would recommend for someone to start with that is if you don't yet have a background that allows you to break problems apart into smaller chunks and understanding where to start there. This is really the key fundamental skill that most machine learning developers have. It's being able to look at some bigger problem. Is there any kind of pattern that you can see that you can turn that into a question that could be answered with machine learning? And then how do you frame that into a problem that could be solved with machine learning? So working on problems like that allow you to start seeing something bigger, turning that into a question that could be answered with machine learning, breaking that down into smaller components. There's really good books that describe these processes as well. They talk about machine learning pipelines, about getting into a data science mindset. And so if you are interested in that holistic view, I encourage to check out some of those free resources. There's also a really great online project, which the name escapes me right now, but I think it's like the free data science master's program. So this wonderful person a few years ago created a website which gathered all of the free resources and all of the skills and developer needs that you might have to build out what is essentially a free master's program. And so if you can find different components of that that are interesting for you, it'll also help you find communities that you may share those interests with, so you can work with them and talk more with them about what is important. So next, I see somebody asked, how can I showcase to my employer that open source contributions matter and it is important? This is a question we work hard on at Google to help every person connect their many contributions back to what is important to their team and their work. And for this, I recommend that you start from a place of understanding, do you know what is important to your team, to your organization, to your employer? So what are the different levels that you work within in a group? What is important to them? How does that connect to what is important to you? And is there a component then within your work that you can draw analogies to and show that this is impactful for your employer? So I think that it's this idea of how are you phrasing it, or how are you drawing the lines between what is important to a person, an organization, a role, a team, versus what is important to you, and trying to get those things to align. And if it's tricky because maybe you're working on something very deep in open source that may or may not have a direct line back to your team, that's where it gets a little more complicated. But if you're working on something like a library, an operating system, a programming language, if you're building things to be able to connect your employer's technology stack to the wider open source ecosystem, this is where it gets a little easier to draw those connections. Other ways that we like to encourage people to think about or promote this work, which sometimes works, is not necessarily trying to represent everything as economic capital. So because open source is a socio-technical system, we can't ignore the human component, which means not everything translates into dollars. Even time, not everything translates into dollars. So why we spend our time in open source and what we spend our time on may not always translate into immediate economic gain or loss. Sometimes it's something like risk reduction, which we don't always represent with an economic model. So I would encourage you to think a little bit about, how do you draw those connections? How do you understand the meaning between what you're doing and why your employer should care about it? And then start to be prepared to really see some either clear patterns come up, or start to show and understand whether or not that work is valued where you're working. Okay, I'm going to see if, let's see if there's any. I think I have time for one or two more questions. Okay, so great one. With so many open source projects doing compelling work, how would you prioritize which to contribute to first? This is actually really straightforward for me. It's where you feel the most connected and where you feel the most valued and seen. For me, I don't recommend that people join communities, groups, or projects where they feel like they have to work hard to make their contributions recognized. So if you are joining a community or a project where that's not valued or it's not done well, and if that's something you want to work on and you want to make that a priority and they're welcoming to that, I encourage that. But otherwise, for me, the communities which do not put an emphasis on showing that there's a wide community of people who are bringing forward what that project is, and are only highlighting maybe just a few key people, I wouldn't join those yet. unless they're looking for actively to change. So the Python programming language, the CPython developer core, I would call out, has been making some amazing strides in the last few years, especially to grow a more diverse team with very focused initiatives. The TensorFlow project that Joanna and folks work on has also been doing some fantastic work to create a more diverse ecosystem in general. So either of those I'd recommend as great starting places. Let's see. Okay, I think that's all we have time for today for my session. So thank you all for joining me. Next up, I'll turn the floor over to Joanna Carrasquilla for the panel and fireside chat.
I hope you are all enjoying this event so far. We are going to continue now with the fireside chat, and I'm really excited to have all of our speakers with me today. So before we dive in, I would like to introduce our panelists for the fireside chat. So I'd like to start with Alana Karan, Director of Special Projects in Search at Google and an author of the book, The Adventures of Women in Tech, How We Got Here and Why We Stay. Then we have Bianca Ximenez, Head of Artificial Intelligence at Guppy, and Michelle Carney, Senior User Experience Researcher at Google, and a lecturer at Stanford University on designing machine learning. Thank you all for being here today. I would like to start with a question for the panel, and I would love each one of you to give us a short and concise answer just so we can maximize our time. But being machine learning and AI and data science a relatively new field, I would love to learn more about your background and how you got started in machine learning. So maybe we'll start with you, Michelle, and then we'll move to Bianca and Alana.
Awesome. Yeah, so excited to be here. So I think my background, I came in at exactly the right time. I've always been interested in how people think about things and in neuroscience. So I actually studied cognitive neuroscience. And for those of us who might have heard of neural nets, that actually comes from neuroscience. So I was building out neural networks for, let's say, cochlear implant algorithms and that kind of thing too. But just because you can optimize a model to some nth degree doesn't mean that people will actually perceive a difference about a model performing better than another model. So that's really where I got interested in the people element. So I later got my master's in user experience and machine learning. And as you mentioned, I now work as a UX researcher or researching the experience of machine learning tools. And I teach on the topic too. That's how much I love it.
Fantastic. How about you, Bianca? How did you get started in machine learning?
Hi, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to use Michelle's template for the answer. I come from economics because I've always wanted to understand, like I've always wanted to explain things, and I figured that economics was a good way to do that, to explain human-built institutions and organizations. So when I started working, though, I realized that what I really wanted to do was deliver value to people, to users. And in economics, it's really hard to see the user like in the end of the pipeline. and I realized that computing was the best way to do that. So I got back into school and went in a master's for in computer science, and later on to a PhD in computer science, which I'm just getting wrapped up now at the end of the year. But I decided in my PhD to pursue machine learning because I figured I was living in a turning point. We are in a turning point, a very exciting turning point where I could connect like science fiction and all the things I've always liked with actual like models and deliverables and how to get things to work at scale and to millions of people. So it was a very exciting time to be a part of that, and I wanted like to leave a mark and to make a difference in that sense. So that's why I started in machine learning.
Wow, what a fantastic journey, Bianca. How about you, Alana? Can you please tell us more about your background and how did you get started in machine learning?
Sure. I think I'm maybe a bunch of folks listening are kind of like me, where my role isn't central to ML. I don't work in ML, but I have to support a team who has to figure out how to use it, how to leverage it. And so I need to know about it because sort of every job is getting to the point where we need to know about it. I really got started in tech. I was a history major in college, and I started to self-teach myself HTML and JavaScript because I really liked what was then, to date myself, sort of the emerging world of web design and creating on the internet. And so that was just really how I started getting into tech and got the interest, and later took jobs in tech because I was so inspired.
That's fantastic. And actually, coming from a non-traditional tech background myself, I'm a pharmaceutical scientist. What you said, Alana, really resonates with me. So I think my next question to you as a follow-up is, what have you found to be key skills to navigate into different roles in tech and perhaps at Google as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that I've worked in a tech company for years, and you'd think the problems would be computer problems, but they're all people problems. I've worked dealing with people, figuring out people, how to motivate them, how to partner them with them, way more than I've sat down and had to worry about a true technical problem. And so a lot of what I talk to people about is what I think we misname soft skills, right? I think they're actually very hard. They're the things like, how do you negotiate? How do you influence without authority? How do you lead people and motivate people? How do you deal with people when you're not aligning and it's tough? And how do you deal with conflict? So many things like that. How do you make decisions? And those things I think are translatable. They're translatable from role to role. So when I am thinking about what skills I'm building in a role, I don't think necessarily about that specific background that I had to learn for that product. I think about, oh, in this job, I learned how to make decisions. In this job, I learned what you have to do when you have to partner with outside companies. And those are the things that I talk about when I'm looking for jobs, when I'm interviewing, et cetera, because that's what's translatable and that's what helps you move around.
I couldn't agree more. And I love the fact that you touched upon leading teams and motivating teams, because we are actually also celebrating Bianca, who's been recently promoted to head of AI at Scoopy. So congratulations, Bianca. This is very exciting for you and for all of us. And I would like to know if there was a point in your career where you felt like things were really taking off for you, and if so, was there anything that you did to signal to your leadership that you were ready for the next steps and to take on a leadership role at your company?
Um, I'm very excited about this new role too. It would be easier, I think, if I thought there was a turning point. Yeah, I thought it was like, well, this is the point where my career is taking off. I don't think that is real. That is something that we expect to happen, but for me at least, it didn't. But there are many taking off points in all of our careers. So The first one I can remember was in 2014. I was still in my master's, starting to work with computer science, and I went to talk. I started organizing really a Google developer group in Recife, my hometown in Brazil. And I went to an event where I gave a talk to about 60 people. And I thought, wow, that's it. That's like, I don't know, like that's the most exciting thing I've ever done and I'll ever do. And then I started thinking, well, maybe that's not all, and I kept going and I had no idea how far I would get. And as a GDE and I was a product manager in AI, and now I'm a head of AI, but now I impact millions of people indirectly and thousands of people directly. And I couldn't think that would happen. So I didn't signal to my leadership I was ready for something, but I was always willing to do more. And also preserving my mental health and my limits, but I wanted to have more responsibility. Sometimes women, they think they're underprepared or that we don't know enough. And I think that when you become an adult, you realize that nobody knows enough. I think that's part of growing mature. So, well, I also don't know enough, and that's not different from anyone else. So, I'm going to do my best and I'm going to be willing to do it as best as I can. And I was lucky that Guppy saw it and that we were working together now too. So, I guess that's it.
Oh, I absolutely love your story. And we'll touch upon the MLGD program later on during this conversation. But also, I don't know if you feel the same, but sometimes women and people of color, we are often the only in the room, which can spur imposter feelings as well. So I think I'll go back to you, Michelle. For someone wanting to get started in machine learning, what should they do? How should they get started? Any tips for our audience today?
Oh my gosh, totally. If I could just let everyone know, like, even though this is like a one-way talk, I know that everyone who is watching is an expert in something. And I think that when you realize that you have an expertise in maybe it's something like baseball cards or makeup tutorials or, baking pies, I don't know. I personally, I'm a fiber artist. I do a lot of knitting. That's what my expertise is. You can realize that machine learning, data science, AI is just a way to problem solve. And you can apply that problem solving skill set to whatever your area or domain of expertise is. The other thing, if you're just getting started, is it can be a little bit intimidating, and that's okay. But show up, keep on showing up, find communities that resonate with you, friends in other areas. I will say, for me, about 10 years ago, I got really lucky and I found women who code, women in machine learning and data science, and they were amazing and supportive to help me actually transition into a career in tech. But there's so many other groups out there. Like I run my own meetup group on machine learning and UX. There's Ladies That UX, which is orthogonal and kind of related to machine learning. And just look around. What communities are near you? Like Bianca mentioned, finding that community in Brazil and being all like, wait, these are my people. And these are the people who will hold me accountable and also celebrate the fact that I'm excited and passionate about this topic and will help me achieve my goals. So definitely check those out. And there's free tutorials and everything out there too. Keep on showing up.
I love that we all keep referencing community support and building communities, and I believe that community is such an important thing in every field, in every role. So actually, my next question to the panel, and this is a question from the audience, and please keep asking your questions in the chat, either to the panel or to one of our panelists. And how do we build communities of allies? As women in tech, how do we create that support system that includes women, men, stakeholders, and to advance our careers and help us show up as our true selves at work? And this is a question for the panel, so who would like to start?
Well, one thing that I love about community building, oh, sorry, Elena,
No.
is that, even if you are making something new, there has always been something that comes before you. And Elena, I'm sure you know about this from history and everything too. So looking at citing your sources not as a weakness, but more as a strength of like, I am building off of other people's ideas. And if we can shift that framework and just have that be a normal practice of like, hey, Bianca, Elena had this awesome idea and I'm building on top of it, that helps celebrate everyone and all the voices that maybe are heard or maybe weren't heard or weren't ready to be heard.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if we have time. Sorry, Elena, go.
Oh yeah, I was just going to add that I'm now seeing in groups for years at Google, for instance, we had employee resource groups for the group. And those were really important to, I think, give people a place to go of community, of belonging, of common conversation, navigating challenges of programming, maybe even training. So great. But what there weren't necessarily were ally groups for those groups. And I'm seeing now that we're starting to create those. And I think those are a great add-on, right? Like I can join a Search Black Plus group and be an ally and then hear more. But there's still the group for Black people to get together and not have to worry about talking to us and explaining anything. But there is also this place where we can get together and be allies and figure out how to be allies. So I think that while sometimes we're just trying to do it all informally, I do think there is something to maybe making it formal, making it stated, making it at your company a thing that you can join, that you can do, that you can sign up for, and just inviting people in.
Absolutely, Alana. I couldn't agree more with you. And how about you, Bianca? Would you like to add some thoughts on how to build communities of support and allyship as well?
I think there's a lot to be said on those things, and we won't be able to extinguish the subject in this panel because it's really short. But we're going through that in Guppy right now. So we're building what we're calling affinity groups, which have a lot of allies in many different for many different demographies, and we're making it official, we're making it institutional. So I think this is very important that we organize organically, but also that we have support from official institutions. And so I think this is a way to go. This is something important for us to consider as leaders, as companies, as people who work and need others, which is everybody essentially. So, but like from another point of view, when you're considering building a group of allies, I think you have to know yourself a lot. You have to know your limits just so you understand, you're able to figure out where you feel comfortable. What do you expect from people who are your allies? And also like how to talk with people who are not your allies. Like how can you transform them? Can you bring them to your side? How can you leverage their voice and use it to support yours? So there's a lot of things you have to consider. But especially you have to know your limits and be able to connect with people, sometimes people you don't like, and do the hard work of maybe making them change their mind, like building bridges. So this is very important.
Definitely building credibility, making sure that our work speaks for itself, but also that we are advocates for the things that we do and that we believe in ourselves. We're actually going to talk a little bit more about allyship and building communities of support during the networking event. So stay tuned for that part of the event. And I would like to move on to the next question from the audience. So one of our participants wrote, "It seems like the women that stay in the technical side of engineering are only the ones that are exceptionally smart. As someone that doesn't meet the model minority standard, how should average women engineers like me find a place to keep working on technical projects?" And Michelle, would you like to give us an answer to this, and perhaps then we'll move on to Bianca.
For sure. Yes, in a prior life, I was the only woman over on a totally very ML driven team. But some of the things that really resonate with me when I look for a new team are there other women in adjacent roles or my manager or my skip level who will understand? The other thing is too, I love that Bianca and Elena have mentioned allies, groups or affinity groups and everything too. I definitely also will like test the waters of like, hey, who is a part of these groups? Do you have any headcount? Can I go join? That kind of thing too. I think it really does reach back to, your job is ideally where you're spending 8 hours a day, and it has to be on a topic hopefully that you like and you can make an impact, but also with people who celebrate you and you feel heard and important and that you can make an impact there too. So look for other people who might have a team of engineers who are women and stuff. In fact, actually last week was my first meeting where everyone who joined was a female ML engineer, and it was totally like happenstance. It was like, whoa, oh my gosh, in my 10 years, this has never happened. This is so cool. So they're growing. Keep staying here. We need you.
I don't know the person who asked that, so it's difficult to make assumptions. But why do you think you're average and everybody who stay there is so extra smart? Like, how do you know that? And sometimes you gotta just keep showing up, like Michelle said, just so you can see that those people you find are extra smart and maybe like, oh, this is unreachable for me. They're pretty normal people too. So um I don't know. It sounds to me as if you have a lot of imposter syndrome, but you can be where you are, and we have average people all the way, and nobody's that average. It's just like Michelle said too, like everybody's an expert in something. So if you connect more with communities around you, maybe and you start feeling that kind of support and admiration, people will also tell you you are super smart, and maybe you'll be very shocked by it. But hey, probably you are also super smart. Everybody is in some sense. So I'd say don't think of yourself that way, and just try to reframe that.
I absolutely love it. And that's definitely one of the key messages that we wanted to share with you all today, is that don't underestimate your value. We are here, we are showing up as women in tech, as future leaders in machine learning. And in our own different ways, we all have a place at the table. So my next question is for Alana. And there's someone asking, which industry do you think will benefit from ML in the following years? And do you think that women could lead the change in those industries?
Oh, that's interesting. I, in general, am keeping my eye on a lot of I don't know what I would call them exactly, but the real world applications of things. So if we get outside of what's been sort of hot over the last decade of apps and games and food delivery services to your door and all of this type of stuff, I think what the pandemic brought to life is that a lot of our core infrastructure, societal infrastructure, is lacking. And so if you look at healthcare, if you look at services for city workers, if you look at water, air, right? Like very basic things, housing, all of these types of applications, I think that there is a real need to focus there and think about how to make it achievable to scale. And that logically starts to have you look at ways that ML could support the humans, not put the humans out of work, but ways that we could give better tools, whether it's the X-ray technician, whether it's the city worker trying to identify the next thing that's going to break. What is it? And I think that that is potentially, could be a real forte for women, because we have generally, I'm about to go into generalizations, been raised as society's caretakers. This has been true for centuries, right? We take care of the families, we take care of the group. Traditional jobs for women initially were things like teachers and nurses, caretaker jobs. And so I think we've still got a lot of that coding. We think about that. You talk to women and they often talk about wanting to help people. And so I think that we are actually more likely to think of these applications potentially, more likely to think about how they would apply and help our society. And so I think it's really great that this is all coming together. And I really hope it stays that way. I hope we don't just move on to the next gaming app. I hope we really do take this time and focus in. I think there's a lot of great businesses to come from this and a lot of great career opportunity.
I love it. Thank you so much, Alana. We have another question for Bianca and one for Michelle. So I'll start with Bianca. I am from Colombia. Hello, our Latin participants. Welcome to our event. And I work for a company where almost 70% of employees are women, but in the IT department, they're only men. I am the first woman in the area right now. How can I motivate other women in my company to join me in the field of IT? So, Bianca, would you like to perhaps answer this question with a bit of a context to what it means for our LATAM culture?
I can try. I don't know if I can answer. It's a very complicated subject, but well, I know your pain. I'm often still the only woman in the room. But I think that one of the things we must do as women who are already here in IT, right, is to let people know that IT is not something like crazy complicated, is not something that does not belong to us. There is no space for us, and kind of demystify this idea that computing and especially maybe machine learning and AI are so unreachable. And just like Michelle said, it's just another way of solving problems. And I think that sometimes women can't identify herself with the area because it looks so masculine. But essentially, what we have to understand is that it's just another way to solve problems, and women excel at that. We're so good at solving problems, right? So why can't we excel in machine learning? It just makes no sense. So if we're coming from that point and like trying to connect how IT works with everything else, I think it's a good starting point, like demystifying AI and ML. Like that's what I
completely agree. I love empowering, uplifting other women in the field. I think that's critically important. And I would like to ask another question, just very, very quickly to you, Michelle. What is one ML trend that excites you right now?
Oh my gosh, totally. Actually, okay, on that topic, Bianca, I think just showing people how the technology works is going to be such a game changer. Like in the last 5 years alone, we have seen so many innovations in how machine learning is done. Like you do not need to train your own models anymore. You can use models off the shelf. You don't need to be an ML expert to actually work in ML. And so with this like ease of use and the fact that a lot of this is becoming a lot more available to every person, we need more people in the room who actually want to apply it. So like Elena and Bianca were mentioning, we need folks who have a passion about medical healthcare and are thinking about what is a potential machine learning problem and how do I apply this model to it. So this is something that definitely keeps me up at night about those domain experts coming in and using other models that other people have built, but applied in their new way in their own domain where they are domain experts. So
I love it. And just very quickly for Alana, you wrote a book called The Adventures of Women in Tech, How We Got Here and Why We Stay. So in speaking with over 80 women that you interviewed for your book, did you notice patterns of what helped women navigate their careers and thrive?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've touched on many of them in this conversation. I noticed that there were 5 key tools. And if you buy the book, it's chapter 8 where I cover these. And one of them we've spoken about quite a bit, find support. because women who'd navigated their careers alone often had a lot of self-doubt and insecurity. But those with support had those people on tough days, had people who helped them through decisions or said, hey, you're insecure today. It's not, that person shouldn't have said that to you. That's not true, right? All of that. But the other ones were about resilience. How do we build strength and muscle when we have tough days to continue to go on? How do we market ourselves? How do we figure that out? Because if we wait to be crowned, it's not always going to happen. We're going to have to get good about talking about ourselves and letting people know what we're strong at and what we want to do. And that really speaks to the next one, which is about asking. How do we ask for what we want and what we need? And the final one is one that I always think it sounds a little hokey, but it's true. How do we own our awesome? How do we know, very much like Bianca was talking about earlier, that we're just as smart as everyone else. We deserve it just like everyone else. And how do we remind ourselves out of it and feel it?
Absolutely fantastic advice. And as we start wrapping up this session, I just would like to remind our participants that if your question didn't get answered during this event, please go to the TensorFlow forum at discuss.tensorflow.org. Feel free to ask your questions, and we will be there answering everything, all the questions that you may have. I'm sorry we are limited on time, but it's been an absolute pleasure to be here with you all today. And having said that, I would like to just quickly post one last question to the panel so we can wrap up with some inspiring and motivational remarks to all the women that are watching us from all around the world. So if you could give one piece of advice to our audience today, what would it be? And I would like to start with Bianca, then move on to Michelle, and we'll finish with Alana.
I think I have two things I want to say. The first thing we've already covered a lot in this panel, which is you're not starting from zero. Even if you're like going for another career and you're not originally from computing, no one here is, and we're still doing it. So don't get caught up on that. All your soft skills, which are really hard skills to get, they're transferable. So you're not maybe that's hard to hear also, because we always have that idea that we can start from scratch, and that is just not true, like for the good and for the bad. So you're not starting from zero. So don't be afraid to make the move. And the other thing I want to say is don't get caught up on if you look like someone from IT or not. This is something that happened to me a lot when I started like going to communities, because people would often say, you don't look like someone who understands mathematics so much. You don't look like someone from computing. You don't look like whatever. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So if I put my glasses on now, do I look more like computing? Do I look more like mathematics? I don't know. That makes no difference whatsoever, like what you're doing. So don't get caught up on that. Be you. Is like, I think it's credited to Oscar Wilde, but BU because everyone else is already taken, right? So, and IT is just another area of study. Computing is just another area of study, and machine learning too. So just come over and look however you want to look.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Bianca. Michelle.
Yeah, I think if I were to give one piece of advice, maybe just building off of what Bianca just said, you don't need to know ML to work in ML. I think that is something that I really just want everyone who's listening to really resonate with. We've all talked about it, about you have skills, you're an expert in something. We need folks from different domains to work in ML and build the future of ML that is for everyone, by everyone. So I know it can be a little intimidating to be like, oh, must have 10 plus years in ML, but you know what? Maybe you have 10 plus years as a program manager, or you're really great at organizing things and you really want to keep track of models. That's amazing. We need folks like you here. So know that you are wanted. It is just about finding the right teams for you, but we're excited to work with you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Alana, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I think I would just encourage everyone to figure out a safe experiment for themselves, right? I think that may be different size for you than the person that you've seen get into ML before. But I think sometimes we hold ourselves back because we think it has to be this gigantic leap. But maybe for you, it's just a safe thing would be saying that next month, every day, you're going to read something about ML to self-educate, right? And so I think those things build on each other. And we should be comfortable starting with these little safe experiments and building from there, because that's how we grow. And don't compare yourself to someone else and think, oh, I need to be that tomorrow. Think about what will work for you and start there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Alana. Thank you to our three panelists for joining us today. I think we learned so much from your experiences. It was really exciting to have all these questions answered. And if you are watching us live, and if you still have questions that you'd like the team to answer, please head to discuss.tensorflow.org, and we'll be answering all your questions on the TensorFlow forum after this event. So we will have a short break now, and during the break, please choose the breakout room that is most suitable for you. We have 3 tracks today: a beginner track if you want to learn how to get started in machine learning, an intermediate track if you are a developer who wants to become an ML developer, and an advanced track if you want to take your career to the next level. We will reconvene here on the main live stream to hear the closing remarks and the key takeaways from this event from Google Engineering Fellow Carrie Botstock. And afterwards, we'll connect for the networking event with Google leadership, recruiters, and a few more surprises. So stay tuned, and we'll see you shortly.
Hi there. My name is Kelsey Schroeder. I'm a product manager at Google ML, and I'm excited to welcome you to our beginner track for our Women in ML Symposium today. This track will focus on getting started in machine learning and everything you need to know to get started on your journey. And today, I'm delighted to be joined by three guests. We'll hear from Merve, who's a developer advocate at Hugging Face, Irene, who's a technical program manager at Google, and Chandni, who's a product solutions engineer at Google. How this will work is we'll hear from each guest for about 15 minutes about their journey in ML, and then we'll come back with the full panel for Q&A at the end. So as you listen to the presentations, please add questions with the link below to the group so we can make sure we cover the topics that are most interesting to you. With that, I will turn it over to Merve for our first presentation.
Thank you, Kelsey. Welcome, everyone. I'm Merve. I will talk about how to make progress for finding your first job as a machine learning engineer and becoming a machine learning GDE. I'm a GDE in ML for a year now. I'm currently doing TensorFlow maintenance and advocacy at Hugging Face, studying on a data science master's program at the same time. I was a big fan of the recent industrial revolution, and I thought I might just join the hype, so I took the data science course at the bachelor's degree I was studying. I come from an operations research background, so it's easy for me to learn as I have already learned most of the concepts earlier, like optimization, decision theory, and so on. When I graduated, unfortunately, I couldn't find a job, so I told my family to wait, and they said, okay. I joined boot camps, communities. I did boot camps as a mentor. As I already knew algorithms, I learned that it's very important to build a portfolio more than any other certificate. So I found my first job after doing an NLP project, and I put it in my portfolio. I started doing chatbots and NLP products for a living. And then I started giving workshops on machine learning in Google developers circles and other communities, which enabled me to learn even more thanks to community. I learned a lot from community. I was then reached out by former Middle East and Northern Africa Director of Google Communities, İlker Akansel, and was continuously pinged by him on me becoming a Google developer expert. Then I applied and got it, and I will tell you shortly how I did that. So currently I'm doing my master's in data science and teach people what I learn in my master's, because I believe that information should be accessible for everyone. Not everyone can afford doing a master's in computer science and data science. So I'm basically trying to democratize machine learning. I'm currently, for my love of communicating with like-minded people, I decided to change my path to become a developer advocate. I'm currently building tools for developers using Hugging Face, and also I'm maintaining TensorFlow ecosystem in Hugging Face and build community. We build tools necessary for machine learning and make them open source and accessible to democratize machine learning and empower communities to build their own models. Next, I would like to talk a bit about MLGDE program. MLGDE program is one of the community efforts of Google on machine learning. As MLGDEs, we help democratize Google's machine learning efforts, teach people about Google's ML ecosystem and also machine learning theory. These are mostly on TensorFlow, JAX, Flex, Trax, and other solutions of Google. If you love building things with community, teaching people machine learning, and if you have a community mindset that you like to spend your time with a community, with like-minded people, you are a great fit to this program. I would like to talk about the steps of becoming an MLGDE. So first step is the eligibility check, which assesses your eligibility to the program on your existing community efforts. This can be in shape of blog posts, live streams, face-to-face workshops, or YouTube videos. You need to share what you know with people so that we can get an understanding that you are actually a community-oriented person. If you pass this step, if you pass this step, you go through the community interview, which is more on community mindset and your motivations as a member of the community. This is held by another Google developer expert. So you will be interviewed by a Google developer expert in the area you are joining, which is machine learning. If you pass a community interview, the last step is the product interview, which you will be interviewed by a Googler on various topics. This can be about machine learning. This can be about how you can communicate any machine learning algorithm, and so on. This is held by an engineer working at Google's ML ecosystem. So I am not a fan of giving advices, as I feel like everyone is built different, and these tips might not work for you. But what helped me in my journey was the online courses, being in a community, spending time on Kaggle, which is something I don't do for the last year. But finding a community is very important in your journey of becoming a machine learning engineer. If you don't have a job as a data scientist or a machine learning engineer, I feel like it's best if you build a portfolio in GitHub, Kaggle, or Hugging Face, consisting of end-to-end notebooks. You can build cool UIs for your machine learning models, as this is going to increase your chance on finding your first job. Thanks a lot for listening. You can reach out to me from my Twitter DMs. There is my Twitter handle. If you have questions on becoming a machine learning Google developer expert or starting your career as a machine learning engineer. Next, you will be listening to amazing presentation of Irene.
Thank you, Merve. My name is Irene Genumis, and I am glad to, I'm a technical program manager at the TensorFlow team at Google. I am very glad to be with you today to talk about how we can build diverse OSS communities in the areas of AI and ML, and more specifically to tell you how you can get started in open source and be part of the TensorFlow community. A little bit about my background. All journeys are different, and that's okay. When it comes to exploring your career options, there's no one size fits all. I started in a very small traditional island in Greece that is like 40,000 people. I liked math, but there was no obvious path to computer science there. I moved to Canada and studied electrical engineering at McGill, where I actually found the books by James Whittaker about how to break software, which actually got me in trouble at school. It's very easy to start finding security flaws at university, but it also got me my first job at Microsoft, where I stayed for 13 years. So hacking has pros and cons. Near the end of my 13 years at Microsoft, I was doing predictive programming there, and that's where I realized that Google has been and is still to this day on the cutting edge of ML, which is what drew me to Google. I very much wanted to learn more about ML. I knew a lot about how to build infrastructure for enterprise systems, and I decided to move my career to Google. When I first joined, I didn't know much about ML, so I got actually into book clubs. So shout out to Latinx AI. They took me in and we were trying to read the deep learning book by Ian Goodfellow. So we were doing the part where each one of us pretty much was reading a chapter, trying to understand all the backgrounds and sharing it with like everybody else. The interesting part is at that time, actually, Ian Goodfellow used to work on the floor above me. So I had a clutch if I needed it, that if I had questions, I could get him to actually come back and reply. He was gracious enough to present the last chapter of the book to show like, thank you for going over the full book. And it was a great closure there. I had started by doing counter-abuse programs at Google, and then I switched 4 years ago to be part of the TensorFlow team. And I'm working to open source TensorFlow pipelines, as well as basically onboard enterprise and other users to our software. I have co-published papers, so in a way that we actually published our experiences of what it takes from going to a model, the model that you train on Python notebook, and what it takes to actually bring it to production to make sure it is reliable, to make sure you understand when it becomes stale. And I also technically edited a couple of books. So basically my career journey is, I started from not knowing anything about ML to reading stuff to maybe being able to technically edit a book. So if I can do it, anybody else who puts the effort can do it as well. So that's my experience of how I got started in ML, and I'm very proud of the work that the TensorFlow team is doing to open source, as well as bring more voices, contributors, and users to the table. And talking about more voices, TensorFlow is an open source framework, and our goal is to enable our contributors by fostering an open and welcoming environment where all contributors with all levels of experience are welcome. Our diverse community is governed by the TensorFlow Code of Conduct that you can see here, and maintained by the project stewards Thea Lampkin and Joanna Carrasquera. Some parts of our community, our vibrant community, includes code and non-code contributors, community managers, and students. We onboarded 167 machine learning experts, just like Merve, which are part of the Google Developer Experts Network. They're practitioners from the community that also do outreach. We have established 80 TensorFlow user groups worldwide to upscale contributions to TensorFlow with a local focus. I've actually ended up pre-COVID going to Singapore and being part of such a community and giving a talk there and realizing all the TensorFlow users and all like the startups. It was a great environment to both meet entrepreneurs as well as for students to come and visit, because they got the opportunity to see what are the jobs and what are the opportunities out there. We formed 13 special interest groups, which are focus groups to contribute to certain parts of TensorFlow. And we had about 20 students last year participating in the Summer of Code, some of which published examples for automatic speech recognition. Furthermore, our documentation has been translated to 12 languages, and on GitHub we have about 2,500 contributors and 90,000 commits. What a fantastic work. Altogether, we have built an open source project that we can be very proud of. But still, we need to make it easier and more transparent to contribute to TensorFlow in order to empower our community to do more and have a wider reach. We will go over some of the changes that we made over the last year in order to achieve this goal. We have defined APIs where you can add or split out code into separate projects. We have made it easier to start building and creating new projects with easy entry points like documentation, testing, or contributing by showcasing your project via blogs. It definitely inspires other women to see examples of women and their contributions in ML. This is an example of an easy contribution, which is actually very valuable. This was done by Hai San, which is Happy as a San, and this is our translation into Korean. We have about 268 tutorials currently translated across 12 different languages. And we really want to provide a good experience to our contributors. So in order to do this, we will always continue to support translations of our documentation into other languages. Another way to contribute is via blog posts. We have had 50 blog posts in TensorFlow, and this is one example of bringing the Mona Lisa effect to life with TensorFlow.js by Emily Z. So whether you guys are doing testing, docs, or blogs, thank you. We have started a process to be able to allow external users to contribute to the design and the decision-making of TensorFlow, and that is via RFCs, which got introduced in 2018. That's a request for comment. We discussed there very large changes, especially when it comes to TensorFlow 2.0. We have accepted 25 RFCs over the last year and 150 RFCs since we began. This is one of the best ways to keep up with the evolution of TensorFlow and provide feedback. And we have already received feedback requests such as pluggable device or end-to-end text processing. And as mentioned, this is a lot of the feedback came through about how we build TensorFlow 2.0. So if you try it out, you'll see a lot of your requests including there. For bigger projects, which require us to work as a team, we have created a TensorFlow special interest group. Those are groups with a defined project focus, and we basically take ownership of specific areas to add and maintain new features. SIGs are how we collaborate around building TensorFlow the most. There are many users of TensorFlow outside of the ones that the core team can resource, and we wanted to make sure that we enable that collaboration in a way that the project can also be supported going forward. We first started by SIG build, and now we have about 13 SIGs. There's SIG.io, where we can connect TensorFlow to other systems like Apache Ignite, Kafka, Arrow, Parquet, Hadoop, name it. SIG.js, where we support web developers using machine learning with TensorFlow in either their JS applications, something like when we do the real-time image analysis from the browser or PostNet, as you have seen it. The contributors are welcome to join the SIGs based on the parts of TensorFlow they enjoy or care the most. Right now, we have about 80 TensorFlow user groups distributed across the world. And so far, those user groups have reached out to more than 100,000 machine learning developers worldwide. And by the way, if your country or city does not have a TensorFlow user group, feel free to reach out to us, and we can help you with the resources and share the best practices from around the world. And the events, as mentioned earlier, are a great way for you to engage with the community. We also have about 167 GDs that I mentioned earlier. The US has the most with 25. And last year, GDs gave more than 1,000 talks and published 295 articles, reaching about 500,000 developers. Our ML GDs play a critical role in advancing ML education worldwide. And if you would like to be part of this brilliant group of experts, get in touch with us. Just to highlight some other events that they did is the African Build-Up event and the DocSpirits event in Korea. So what motivates our GDs? We have also heard from Merve, but we also have here Margaret, who basically said that her motivation is that she's the kind of person that when she sees a problem, she wants to solve it. She wants to be able to help. And we have here Bianca, whose motivation is that she wants to be able to make sure that her own voice is heard. ML will be everywhere in the near future, so it is great for women to have a voice, both in its design, implementation, and as well as curation. But we are not there yet. Out of the 167 ML GDs, only 26 are women. Those women represent about 15 countries out of all the countries. And as you see here, literally, there's about 4 women GDs in Brazil, USA, and India, and then it drops down to 2 and 1, which means the number for most countries representation is 0. So those countries do not have a voice in our program, and we very much want to change that. We started a working group on diversity to be able to find mentors for women who are interested in becoming ML GDs and help them with all the requirements across those ranks. That's a call to action for you. So, because without your involvement, OSS does not reflect the broad audience of its users and consumers, and you can be the one or hopefully more from your country or region. I will not go over the requirements. Merve went over them a few minutes ago. But basically, this is a call to action again. If you're interested, if you know someone else that is interested, that have the right experience, feel free to apply or to refer them. Now, if you say, I'm not there yet, I'm still trying to learn, we also publish multiple courses. We have courses in Coursera. Those are actually free, and you can try that. And we have also, at least the audit function, the audit option, and most of them are free. We also launched a course at MIT, which is free to audit. And we also have partnered with Andrew Ng for the courses in Coursera, which actually I've listened to those, and he's very interesting to listen to. We also launched the TensorFlow certificate program. This is a great way for you to be able to increase your proficiency in machine learning and be recognized in the community for that expertise. We have had about 4,400 people passing the exam since we launched it. And actually, I saw recently a blog from Ayara from Egypt, who basically went from a beginner in ML to an instructor in about a year. That's not a common case, but that is to say that there's a lot of material and a lot of knowledge that can be gained from you following that certificate program. And of course, there are always resources external to TensorFlow. For example, we have had meetups, which is where I said I started by following the Latinx AI meetup. There's Google Student Developer Clubs, data circles, and PyLadies, which are also awesome networking opportunities. So what can you do? What's our call to action? If you're an expert in machine learning, please join the MLGD program. If you want to contribute to a specific part of the TensorFlow code, feel free to join a SIG. If you want to advance your career development, because it is a change of career, because you want to actually boost up your skill set, feel free to take the TensorFlow certificate program. If you have a very cool use case, like the Mona Lisa effect that we saw earlier, or anything else where you're using TensorFlow, reach out to us so you can feature it in our blog. And of course, we have a forum for you to be able to ask any kind of questions that you have. Thank you very much for listening to me. And next we have Chadney.
Thank you, Irene. Hi, everyone. I'm Chandni, and I lead the developer support operations for TensorFlow, basically giving back to community and my fellow community members by supporting them on their ML journeys. It's so good to see you all in this vibrant community of women meet up in this setup. Like Irene said, every journey is unique, and so is mine. If you are listening to this talk, I assume you are looking to get started into your ML journey, and I want you to know and think through my talk that it's the right time to get involved and feel supported through your journey with the resources that I'm going to share with you in my talk. So before I get into my journey, let me tell you a little story. Once upon a time, there was a little girl born and raised in India. She was always told that men are the bread earners while women take care of families, kids, the elderly parents, and take care of their routine stuff like cooking and other stuff. That's the life that girls or women live, and that's what's going to be the future for this girl. She was told that you should study as much as you need in terms of being able to read, write, and do the basic counting in terms of maths. And that's more than sufficient for you to know. Now, this girl thought when she saw her mother working for everybody in the house but for herself and make everybody happy but herself, she thought that, is this the life that I want to have for myself? Is this the future that I want to accept for myself? And she said, I want to change my future. So she, while making sure that she balances out everybody's expectations in terms of making sure that she is learning the household chores and taking care of people and everything, while she studied hard, and she did that really, really well. So that when the day came, the so-called day of, let's see, will her dad let her study beyond the 10th grade? Because that was her deciding moment. And she studied so well and got such a good grades that through the internal and external forces, dad made a decision to let her open her wings. She was able to study, not only go to the college, but do the engineering. She was the first one, not only in family, but the whole society, hundreds of families around her. She was the first one to go to college and do the engineering. She broke all the barriers, worked in the industry, IT industry, became a bread earner in the house, and she went to the States, worked with best of the industry minds there, did her MBA, and joined Google. That's the girl sitting in front of you right now, talking about this talk, how to get started in ML. So why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because if you put your soul and mind into something, you can do it. And this is just ML. You don't need to be an expert to get started. You can become an expert through your journey. So I'm going to tell you how I got started into my journey into ML. So that's my unique path. And I'm going to zoom a little bit into my journey within Google. So after I joined Google full-time in 2015, I was working primarily into data science space. And again, I was really interested in working with cutting edge technologies and everything, that I joined a team that was supporting Google's partners on Google Assistant and Dialogflow. This is a chatbot building platform. This is when I got introduced to the products that used AI and ML, primarily the fruits of ML. And with my curiosity and desire to learn more, I really wanted to know the secret sauce behind this that made it happen so easy to understand the natural language and everything, that I started looking into the roles that had core machine learning into its crux. This is when I found this role that matched so much close to my values and my desire to learn, basically giving back to the TensorFlow communities through supporting them in their ML journeys. Now, opportunities knocking my door. And do I feel ready? Do I know machine learning? Oh boy, no, it was intimidating. I did not know what to do at this point. I am a developer from my computer science life. I've done my MBA at this point and I know how business works. But machine learning sounds intimidating. Like a lot of us, I started Googling how to prepare for an interview about ML, and I was sinking in hundreds and thousands of search results. I didn't know where to begin. That's when I decided to tap into my network of the future teams. And through one of my colleagues, I got to know that the first thing I should do is look into the machine learning crash course. That 20-hour crash course gave me the bootstrapping that I needed to know everything about fundamentals of machine learning and how the basic modeling works. Then, like Irene mentioned in her talk, there are some Coursera courses that is available, and through looking at some of your questions in terms of community questions on GitHub and everything, I felt ready. I felt confident. I interviewed and I passed, and I joined this team that is now helping hundreds and thousands of community members on their questions on GitHub, Stack Overflow, or TensorFlow forum. So why am I even telling you this? It's because this beginner track tells me that you are here because you are looking to get started as well. And like me, if you want to know, and if you're feeling that you need to be expert to get started, don't hold yourself back. Start with machine learning crash course, see where you stand, take some of the Coursera courses. All of my team members today have taken TensorFlow certification. And that also has some suggestions for Coursera courses, but that gives you the proficiency and confidence that you need, not only for yourself, but even for your future employers. Because even though you don't have an experience in ML, working in the industry, the TensorFlow certification is gonna give you that credential that you need to look good to your future employers. Moreover, if you start looking at community questions and start contributing to them, it's going to build your contributor profile. And you're going to look good, not just to your community, but some of them might be your future colleagues. So if you are getting started and if you start feeling like, oh, I know what it is and I can do it, start looking at those questions on GitHub, on Stack Overflow, on TensorFlow forum, and see if you're able to answer them. That could be your checking point. And once you check, reiterate, and go back and reiterate and interview, I think you are going to build a great community profile to that. My team has done the TensorFlow certification, and I can tell you, it works. It works. It gives you a lot of knowledge gain and the confidence that you need. So today, or as of today, every year, more than 30,000 questions get asked on TensorFlow forum, Stack Overflow, GitHub, lot of community platforms. So there are plenty of those questions for you to start contributing to and make a difference. So what are you waiting for? If you feel inspired, know that all of these courses that I shared and Irene shared earlier in her talk are available to you. You can take the TensorFlow certification and feel ready. You can do it. If I could do it, you could do it too. That's all from me. Thank you. And I'll pass it on to Kelsey for the next question and answer session.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to all of our speakers for those presentations. It's fantastic and inspiring to hear about your journeys to machine learning and how you've progressed and what you've learned along the way. Now begins our Q&A portion. So another reminder to please add any questions you have via the link below your screen, and we'll get through as many of them as we can. And anything we don't answer now, we'll be sure to follow up with online. So the first question we have for the group is, what is a common misconception about either getting started in machine learning or just working in the field as a woman? Is there anything you were afraid of when you got started, or any kind of myths you'd like to debunk for the group? For this one, maybe we can start with Merve, if you have any thoughts, and then we kind of pass along to the right.
Actually, I have been training young women like around their around high school ages for programming, and they have this misconception that men are always better than them. But in fact, when you get them to when you empower them to build something, they are actually even better than them. So I didn't really have this misconception, but this is something I have seen in those young girls. And I just wanted to say there is actually not much difference. Especially I have seen so many women in ML compared to other computer science domains, because we have so many interdisciplinary researchers joining to ML from other domains.
Fantastic.
Maybe
Shani,
I can
go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't have the stats handy, so don't quote me on the stats, but I think it's said that men apply to any role when they, like, when they see 20% of their skills matching or even 20% ready, whereas women wait until they meet that 20% bar before they even apply to the role. And I think that is common across the industry. It's not just ML, but when it comes to ML, we even, further second guess ourselves. And like I said in my talk, you don't have to be an expert to get started. We always are learning, and you get started with basics of your knowledge, or like machine learning crash course and all of those things that I mentioned, and you can learn on the job beyond that and really become an expert. So I think that's what I would say, that I would, not just for ML, I think that's what we as women do. We want to just be expert before when we get into something.
In addition to me, it will be, think about that the new perspective that you are bringing into the industry. Think about what type of movies you would like to make. Think about when you go to YouTube, what are the recommendations that you would like to see. Maybe there's some application of ML that maybe your colleagues, if they're male, they may not think about, but because you bring in your perspective, they will actually be able, that would be a great idea that the team can actually explore. So think of the fact that you're a woman as an asset, because you bring a new perspective to the industry.
Fantastic. Another topic that we're seeing come up in some of the questions below, and also that a few of you mentioned in the presentations, is mentorship and the importance of mentorship. And one thing I'd be curious to hear some more about is if one of you has a story about a time that a mentor really helped you in your journey in ML, or any thoughts on the best way to find a mentor for folks in the audience who are interested in finding someone who can help be a guide along their way. What would be the best way to do that?
Do I go first?
Sure. Yeah, we'll take the same order this time and we'll switch it up next time. Merve, go ahead.
So I got mentored 2 times. It was I was first mentored by my data science professor, who has taught me a lot about researching, because it's a big part of machine learning and data science. And it was the second time when I got mentored by İlker, who was the Google Developers Director in MENA region in becoming a GDE. Basically, what he said was to build a solid portfolio in GitHub, because my GitHub was basically a cemetery of half-finished and not finished projects. And then I realized that actually this is this is something that recruiters and the interviewers look when they try to assess you if you don't have any experience. So that was one advice I got. It was a valuable piece of advice. I feel like what is the best way of having a finding a mentor is to actually approaching the person you want to receive mentorship from. That's what I did the first time, but second time we became friends with Ilker and he just continuously pinged me.
I guess I'm next. So yeah, my ML journey and mentorship, like I mentioned, I had to really tap into my network to be able to enter this field. And I think that has shaped me who I am today with my current role. I wouldn't have been able to get started if it wasn't that mentor and my colleague who pointed me to the right resources. So that is what the impact that mentorship has on me so far. But I think how to find your mentor in ML, like, ML space, I really believe in tapping into your network, like either it is your LinkedIn network or your office or school, like you have professors, researchers. Like if you see somebody, try and just ask them. Know that they are knowledgeable and if they would really be able to guide you. But if you do see that in them, a simple way would be just to ask them. A lot of people don't say no, and asking them can take you places.
Absolutely. Yeah, one quick thing to add in there, Chani, and then Irene would love your thoughts. But I think it's very true that sometimes we, work it up in our head so much about asking someone to hear more about their work or to be a mentor or to learn from them. And I think often, most of the time they're happy to share and happy to spend some time, but I think it can be intimidating sometimes to ask that. So if you're wondering whether to approach someone who you're looking to learn from, this is your your signal to go ahead and give it a shot. Irene, anything else you would add on mentorship?
No, everything that you guys said, to you folks said so far are great. For me, it was more about boosting some confidence. So like I first needed to do some reading on my own before I felt confident to go ahead and tell people, oh, I see what you're doing there. Can you tell me more? For me, mentorship typically has come through my managers who recognized like the assets that I was bringing to the table, and they wanted to push me in that next direction to be like, okay, we know you can do this easily, but let's try this new field and let's try our own. Help us write help us complete this particular project. So I'm not very good at discovering mentors. Like I go to meetups that see more like pals, but for me it was internal. It happened to be through my management chain.
Fantastic. The next question we have from the Q&A is, I'm a beginner in AI and ML with previous experience in software development. How do I get a job in AI and ML when nobody wants to hire me with no experience in the area? Chutney, I think you touched on this sort of journey in your talk. Would you like to answer this question?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel you, whoever asked this question. I felt that way one day because yes, I was a software developer before and I knew nothing about ML other than knowing general definitions of that. And I think, like I said, to get started, the machine learning crash course had really good fundamentals. Definitely a good place to start. But to your point around how do even employer, show confidence in me and hire with confidence? And I felt genuinely, and because all of my team members, and today there are 20 people in my team who have taken the TensorFlow certification, and I'm telling you from the first-hand experience, that it works. It gives you the knowledge that you need. It gives you the confidence that you need. And if you are able to answer the community questions, your fellow community questions, know that you are ready. That contributor profile that you build on GitHub or Stack Overflow really goes a long way in showing that even though you may not have the experience working in the industry with like some companies in the space, because you've done answered some people's question or you've done the certification, it gives you and the employer that confidence that is needed.
Sounds great.
One more thing to add. I also came with that experience in ML, but I had experience in how to, let's say, build my infrastructure to do other things. So most of the job descriptions are not ML. ML is not a job by its own. It's meant to solve a problem. So think of what is the experience that you're bringing in, so that ML would be the thing that you take away from that job, but you're giving something. So in my case, it was, I have built a lot of infrastructure projects in the past. So when it came to how do I build TensorFlow machine pipelines infra, I brought the infra experience and I had to learn ML. So every job, look at the job postings, figure out where you have knowledge in and how do you tie into the problem. So then yes, ML may be something that you're more novice at, but you definitely have experience in other aspects of the job.
That's a great point. I think sometimes we anchor too heavily on the specific skill set we're focused on that we don't have, and sometimes forget about the other skill sets that we do have that could actually be really useful in learning whatever we're looking to learn or bringing to a specific role. So I think that's a great point. And one follow-on question we have from the chat here as well that I think is related are, what are some examples of beginner projects to add to my portfolio? So again, in this theme of kind of getting started and breaking into this space generally, Merve, would you have any thoughts on this one?
Actually, there are so many competitions on Kaggle. There is this 30 days of Kaggle challenge on Kaggle. I would highly recommend you to join that. In that, there are so many data sets and so many tutorials. You can solve tasks or join a competition on Kaggle. I would probably suggest that because it's easy to get lost in Kaggle or finding a data set to build your first project.
Agreed. I think Kaggle is a great place to get started, and they have a lot of really fun competitions as well. So pretty much anything you might be interested in, it feels like they have a chance to try your skills and learn from others who are also attempting the same task as well. We have another question from the chat that reads, I'm almost 40 and recently pivoted into data science. I'm feeling overwhelmed by the amount of info and resources. I think we can all relate to that. And also how big the field is. The specific question here, though, is ageism a problem in the field? And is that something that any of you have kind of seen or encountered or have any thoughts on? I'm not sure. Do any of the three of you have something to share on this one with the group?
Thank you for being almost 40. I am 40, so to me, basically, so my experience, to me, it was an asset because of the fact that data science has become an it thing very recently. So it means that actually people with more, that the people that come out of data science are more fresh versus the people who have a lot more experience or more senior seasoned. So to me, like 40 hopefully brings a lot of experience. And that was my journey. You must have a lot of other software experience. So when you apply, you can actually see that. And you can also think about the robustness and the reliability of the systems. Like one of the projects I'm thinking about is like, I'm working on standards for AI responsible development. So part of what grows with age, at least in my case, is to think about the long-term impacts of the changes we're making and how that may impact different user groups. How the sampling of the project works for different user groups, how to make sure to have representation, and then what it means to sustain the particular project beyond its initial conception. So again, 40 is an asset.
Love it. The next question we have is, have you ever felt imposter syndrome when working in the field of ML? And if so, how did you deal with that? Merve, I see you smiling. Do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, sure. So I'm basically working with amazing people in Hugging Face. Previously, I worked in smaller companies, but Hugging Face has so many good people with different assets. Some of them are researchers, some of them are very good engineers that are trying to optimize large-scale machine learning models. Some of them are releasing best models. Yesterday, they just released a model. So it's easy to feel imposter syndrome, especially in your big tech. I feel like I talk to people from Google as well, and most of them are also feeling imposter syndrome. everyone has a different skill set to offer, I guess, and you are there for that reason. I would say I made peace with my imposter syndrome, and it kind of pushed me to learn even more and improve myself. It's hard to get it to not to become an anxiety. So it's you have to be careful, I guess. But everyone has something to offer, and you are not there because you're an imposter. You are there because you actually deserve it.
Well said. Irene or Chutney, anything you'd like to add?
To me, it would be recognize your anxiety, recognize that you feel like not the smartest person in the room, and put it in a box and think about what is the part that I can contribute today. So, for example, to me, I knew a lot about privacy, I knew a lot about other things, I knew a lot about project management. So it'll be focused on that. I understand how to get all the requirements from all the customers. I understand how to deliver this. And the moment you start having those small results that you do, that is what will boost that will boost your confidence. I remember going originally to meetings in Google and hearing like 3-letter acronyms and everything else. I didn't understand what it was, taking down notes and then learning in the evening. And then, yes, that happened for the first 2 to 3 months. I felt that every meeting I was coming from, I had new words I needed to learn. But then I started delivering. Then I started getting a customer, being able to speak to them in those terms and being able to have the customer on board to TensorFlow. And that boosted my confidence. So the feeling was there, but the feeling became from that being the thing that kind of like rank in my brain constantly to like, once in a while I'll be in a meeting and someone says, I'm like, what is this thing? And I have to look it up. So once in a while it comes back again, but it's not as the emphasis that it had in the very beginning. So as long as you can recognize it, put it in the box and figure out like, where is the place that you can contribute? What is the knowledge that you bring to the table and the skills that you bring to the table? And then you will boost that confidence.
Makes a ton of sense. Chutney, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, Murray and Irene covered it very succinctly. That's all I would have suggested as well, that working at Google, working with some of the founders and creators, I am often into the meetings and rooms where people, like, room is full of smart people, and that imposter syndrome is not just on me, it's on like a lot of seats sitting in that room. So like Irene said, just put it in a box and see where you can add your own value, because everybody is unique and you have something to offer.
Absolutely. So I think we have time for a couple more questions. One question for the three of you is, we've talked a lot about getting started in machine learning. One thing I'm curious about as well is what excites you most about being in machine learning and about what the future holds. And what would be something that you think the audience would be excited to hear about, looking forward into what the future holds for this industry? Let's see, Irene, would you like to start on this one?
Certainly. So for me, are all the applications. Think of all these, like, to be able to find a drug about COVID, right? In the past, you had to try multiple different samples. Right now, when you do it via machine learning, the medical applications, in a way, you can minimize the different the different mixes that you need to do. Think about driving. I'm a horrible driver. I hate to drive. So for me, in the past, like, it's sure that when you're 15, you have to learn how to drive. But imagine that driving now means I sit in my seat, I say, this is where I want to go, and it happens. And I don't have to worry about who's cutting me off anymore because something else takes care of it. Think about all the advancements in technology in the way most of the stuff that you had now to do it manually, they can be something that is recommended for you. If I travel, I have to do a lot of research to see what type of hotels do I like. There are certain considerations that I do, what type of sites do I want to see. Imagine if the thing can come with a recommendation for you. In education, the teacher kind of needs to constantly pay attention to how well each student is doing. Imagine if with machine learning, we can tailor education to each person's liking. There's some people who are more visual learners. There's some people who are more like need further explanation. So there can be tests or other things that can be done while you're learning to see what type of learner are you and how can we help you out. So to me, in ML, we're still in the beginning, and I can see lots of applications with regards to healthcare, with regards to jobs, with regards to any kind of also other manual thing that I have to do now that I no longer have to do. Especially I don't have to drive. That for me excites me the most.
Chandni?
Yeah, so through the digital era, past decade and more, we've collected lots and lots of data. Like Irene said, we're just getting started with ML, using this data and making sense of it. What excites me about the future of ML is ways we would be using ML to make differences to emerging communities. Those non-privileged, not so privileged communities where even like basic medical needs are hard to be met sort of things, like ML can make a huge difference. So I'm really getting excited about the things that it can do to humanity in terms of bringing help where it's not possible today. I think I'll just summarize it in that. I know there are like many ways ML is going to help and is helping already, but I'm really looking forward to those days when this is going to be the difference maker.
Absolutely. I think, unfortunately, we are about at time to close, but maybe one final question to the three of you might be if there's one thing that you would like the audience to take away from today, like in a few words or one sentence, what might that be? Merve, let's start with you.
I would say find the closest GDG near you, and you will meet amazing people and kickstart your machine learning journey. Learn a lot from them.
Irene?
It's never too late to start learning something new. If ML is what you want to learn, we welcome it. Your voice is unique, and we need even more women representing this community.
Chandni?
You don't need to be an expert to begin. You will be an expert someday. So don't wait for that moment. Embark on your journey now.
Fantastic. Thank you all again for joining this beginner section. Please join us back in the main stream for closing remarks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Grimes-Bostock. I'm a Google Fellow. I currently work with the core ML team in a technical lead capacity, and I've been working across Google as well to try to tie together our ML plans and our ML infrastructure to build kind of the next 20 years of Google technology that we need. I'm going to try to wrap up today and some key points and some things I hope I can bring to your perspective here. So first of all, the key takeaway here is that diversity in the ML developer space is important. Whatever your background, gender, everything else, you bring that to development in ML, those new ideas and those new product enablements that are really going to make Google products, other products, open source software more applicable to more people around the world. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, that it's easy to look at our community inside the developer world and think about it being male dominated, having certain types of, country makeup, background makeup. But really the people using what you build, the people who are going to benefit from it or not benefit from it are people like us, people around the world who have different perspectives, right? And so I think it's key to remember what you bring to the table when you participate in these larger developer and software forums, right? That your perspective is important. The other thing we've all known from reading the news is that AI may be a key new technology, but it doesn't exist in an engineering vacuum, right? It's not a black box. Understanding the data that gets fed in is a critical step to building models. And it's also central to recognizing certain sources of bias, right? And that's something where our thinking evolves over time, right? And when you read the news, you think about when you are really building ML models, when you're making recommendations, you're making decisions. And those decisions have consequences. And it's very important to think about how the technology you're using, how the data you're using leads to consequences, right? And it's easier to think about that in kind of medical applications where there's a diagnosis criterion, but it has the same outcomes whether you're doing facial recognition. If your software works less well for people whose skin color is different, that's going to affect everyone, right? And that's just, in nice to have applications. But it's a key thing to remember that you are making decisions with this technology. It's not an engineering vacuum. And your background and how we use fairness technologies and responsible AI are really critical to making things successful. At Google, we strongly believe that open source contributions are for everyone. That's always a tough sell in some sense, because I think that the internet is not always the friendliest place, and people who feel disadvantaged in participating in those forums tend to internalize it even more, right? And it's funny to think that you're the only one feeling that way, when probably, I live with someone who contributes to open source quite a lot, and he even, my husband will come in and say, "I can't believe someone said this to me." And I'm going, "Well, you have this huge open source following, and you have all this privilege in this space and all this respect, and you still get these notes where you can't believe someone said this to you," right? And I think that as much as we need to work to identify how to make the open source environment more effective for everyone, I think we also need to make sure that we're all representing that ourselves. The only way the community is going to be easier to work with is if we work in the community and try to change that tone. But also, as Google, we want to try to actively identify and remove barriers to participating, right? And make sure that projects are accessible, that people feel comfortable. And so I just strongly encourage you to bring how you see things and how you'd like to work together to the open source community. The last thing I will say is I always encourage everyone to feel entitled. Entitlement is a loaded word, because it tends to say that it's kind of it's not something you deserve. But I think the way I want to use it is to say that you should feel entitled to work on the projects where you believe you can contribute value in the ways that you need to work. And whether that means that you you need to choose a job which is consistent with your family responsibilities and supportive of them, or that you need to work with people who you just don't feel uncomfortable around. Those are things that you're entitled to in the work environment, and you're entitled to be treated with respect when you come into those contexts, right? And if you're not being, then you're entitled to get a new job, right? And work on it a different way. And you have those choices. And I think it's so easy to tell ourselves that we shouldn't need as much childcare as we do, or we shouldn't need as much help with family responsibilities, or we shouldn't need to change jobs. But the reality is, you have to take a very positive and pragmatic approach to getting what you want. Now, I hope that one day, things like having a lot of family responsibilities won't be unevenly distributed. I hope that's what equity equity means in that space, whether it falls more heavily on women, on folks who are single parents or single children, or on people whose cultures maybe don't support the work that they've chosen to do as strongly as others do. But the reality is, Susan Wojcicki said something very interesting once, which I'm probably going to mangle, but she said, there's no way that she could do her job if she didn't have someone else take care of almost everything else except spending time with her kids. And it's a very pragmatic statement, but I think that's the reality of trying to get what you want in an engineering environment. Is you need a job which is supportive, where you feel secure. You need a job which is consistent with your family responsibilities or other personal things that are important to you. If you strongly believe in going out volunteering in your community, that needs to be something that's consistent with your job and with your work environment, right? And so I just encourage you all to take a really pragmatic view of, you are entitled to participate in ML. You're entitled to work in an engineering or developer environment, and you need to have the support that you need to make that feasible for you. You shouldn't always be feeling like, you don't need what you actually need. And so with that, I sort of encourage you to just take that away, take everything you've learned here away, and try to inspire more people to get involved and to work and to develop in the ML space. So a few key takeaways for post-event, what can you do to follow up? I think the first thing is that you can really integrate responsible AI practices into your workflow as you build models, but also as you engage other people to review data or bring their knowledge in or help plan products. Those are key elements of AI. And you can learn more about that at the TensorFlow Responsible AI site. But just keeping in mind that ML is not in a vacuum, that it depends on your data quality, the breadth of data you've been able to collect, and to bring in reviewers, whether they're technical or just to kind of credibility check the kind of results that you're producing, because we're always learning new things about how the real world interacts with ML. You can also build your own community. I think feeling comfortable in this space is really important. It's important for a lot of us to stay in our jobs. And so I encourage you to either join the TensorFlow forum, get your questions answered, or take other opportunities to really accredit yourself in the ML field, to meet other people. You can work through the Google Developer Experts program. You can get certificates from TensorFlow. Those are things to help you feel more established in the field, and they'll also help connect you with other people who are on the same journey, which is important. And finally, you can do other things. You can join OSS communities or contribute to ML projects. If you're interested, you can head over to GitHub and learn how to join a TensorFlow group. These are all great ways to make yourself feel like you have a place here, you know what you're doing, you can meet other people who are working on the same kinds of things. And finally, you can stay in touch. There's an ML Community Day on November 9th. You can also connect on social media or through YouTube with the TensorFlow YouTube channel. You can get more content. You can follow on Twitter, whatever it takes to really make you feel like you're in touch with the ML community and feel more embedded in that community is important. So finally, as we close out today, I'll just point out what's up next. There's a networking event. We're excited to end the day with this social networking activity, and you can join it by clicking the live button on the website agenda. We'll hear from Kamal, who's the TensorFlow Director of Product Management, and a couple of recruiters who can also talk about, tips and questions from today's content. And I've been told to warn you there's a special surprise. So please keep your cameras on if you're comfortable, and they'll see you shortly at the networking event. With that, I think I'm going to close us out, and I hope you've had a wonderful time at this event and learned a lot of new stuff. Thanks.